So hello everyone, welcome to RBI 247 session. Welcome to Anuj Jindal. Good evening everyone. Good evening Pratima. Good evening Anushka. Good evening Karan. Tell me if everything is fine with the audio and the video of the session so that we can start the session very quickly. Okay. Okay, thank you Afsana. Thank you Pratima. Okay, I think we can start with the session again. Before we start our session, I think we should discuss about the new free resources that we have provided to you in our website. You can simply log in our website anujjindal.in and you can see and access the free resources for free of cost. And here it is. You can access here free resources and then you will go to free practice questions. Okay. And there is some questions related to finance subject of basic and moderate level. More questions like such will be uploaded, like basic, moderate and advanced level questions of different subjects. That is going to be very helpful for your competitive exams like RBI grade B, SEBI grade A exam, right? And NABARD exam. Okay, so it is the main purpose of this is to help you understand the conceptual understanding of the syllabus and help you prepare regarding the static part of the syllabus. I hope this would be very helpful for all of you. Okay, so let's begin with our session. Okay, so let's start with our session again. Today we are going to discuss the financial stability report, right? And we are going to cover it today. We will complete the FSR report today. In the previous session, we discussed chapter number 1 in the FSR report. We covered it in a very detailed manner. We understand each and every key terminologies and their meaning, and we also learned some fact about the financial stability report, right? And in today's session also, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of facts. We will try to understand the facts, interpret what financial stability report want to tell us through these facts, and we will avoid telling a lot of meaning of the key terminologies. Why? Because we have already discussed that in detail in our previous session, and hence we are going to complete this session, complete this report today. Okay, by itself. So in today's session, we have 3 chapters. Chapter number 2, that is financial soundness. Again, we are going to discuss a very important data related to banks, NBFCs and urban cooperative banks. Okay. In the regulatory initiatives, we will try to understand what all initiatives that regulatory bodies have initiated with regarding to various risks. Okay. And in the 4th chapter, we will understand what is a systemic risk survey and what kind of risks are there in the global level and at the domestic level. Okay, let's begin with the first chapter, that is financial soundness. As the name tells you that it talks about the financial soundness. So whenever we talk about financial soundness, we talk about banks, we talk about financial institutions, right? And hence we are discussing about the scheduled commercial banks, right? We are going to discuss various metrics. Let's say, for example, we will discuss about their credit growth. Okay, what are their deposit growth? What is their provisioning coverage ratio? What is their liquidity coverage ratio? All these metrics are going to be very important from the conceptual point of view and from the factual point of view. Okay, so let's discuss each point one by one. Okay, so the first point talks about the bank's credit. Bank's credit, the loans that are given by the scheduled commercial banks to the borrowers, right? And what is the data for the bank credit? As of December 13, 2024, it is 11.3%. Okay, it is 11.3%. It is closer to the deposit growth. So, जितना ज़्यादा close होगा deposit credit, deposits की जो क्रेडिट की जो ग्रोथ होगी, जितनी ज्यादा क्लोज होगी डिपॉजिट की ग्रोथ के साथ, इट इज मोर गुड फॉर द बैंक, बिकॉज majority of the credit is given through the deposits, and which is very cheaper for the banks, and it is good for their net interest margin, and hence it is a good point. Right? Second point says, as of December 13, 2024, the aggregate deposits of the SSBs are 11.4%, which is very close to the bank credit. Okay. Now, as of September 2024, whenever we are going to discuss the data, either it will be the latest data, that is December 13, or it will be September 2024. Which data that you have to remember is September 2024. Okay, this data is very important because 6-month data is more relevant. 6 months data, half yearly data, that is yearly data, is more important here. Okay, so we will focus on these two data. Okay, so as of September, the deposit growth of all SCBs, that is scheduled commercial bank, is 11.5%. Okay, and credit growth of all SCBs is 12.5%. These two data are very important. Okay, these two data are very important. Okay, I hope it is clear. There is nothing technical in it. Okay. Okay. I hope voice is good now. Everything is fine with the audio. Okay, please give me a thumbs up if everything is fine with the audio. Okay. 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 Let's come to the second part of this, which talks about the asset quality of the SCBs. Now, whenever we talk about the asset quality, we are going to talk about the loans. How much gross NPA bad loans are there? Okay. How much of the large borrowers are still in NPA? Okay. Let's discuss each data one by one. First is GNPA, that is gross NPA. This is 2.6%, all-time low. We already discussed these two data in our previous session. I hope it is clear. Okay, the same data were discussed under banking sector. Okay, banking sector section में हमने already पढ़ चुके हैं हम ये वाला data. That the GNPA is 2.6%, which is 12-year low, and net NNPA is 0.6%. Okay. The share of large borrowers in GNPA of SCBs. Okay, अब हम उन GNPA की बात कर रहे हैं wherein there we are talking about the large borrowers. Okay, so why we are discussing about the large borrowers? Because we are not talking about the numbers of loan here. We are talking about the quantity of loan that has been taken by the borrower. क्योंकि उनकी जो वेटेज है उनकी ज्यादा होती है, and उनका impact, उनका एक default can impact the whole performance of the bank, and hence we are discussing the share of large borrowers in the GNPA. So what is the share? It has been decreased from 4.5% in March 2023 to 2.4% in September 2024, which is a good sign. Which is a good sign for the banks, because if GNPA of large borrowers will reduce, it will reduce the risk of default. It will reduce the risk of default as well, and the number of people who are with large borrowing will also, there would be a less risk for them. Okay. The fourth point says the marginal increase in slippage ratio. Now, what is slippage ratio? When a standard asset or loan of the bank is converted into a NPA. Okay, non-performing asset. Okay, so इसकी क्या slippage ratio है? It is 0.7%. It has increased from 0.6%. So there is a marginal increase. There is a marginal increase in the slippage ratio, which is quite risky for the SCBs. Okay. So let's talk about the provisioning coverage ratio. Now, provisioning coverage ratio tells you about the provisions, how much provisions that bank has made with them in order to cover all the potential losses that can happen in the future due to uncertainty. And this has increased to 77%, which is a good sign, because a PCR in between 70 to 80% is a good level of PCR that banks have to maintain. Okay, so this is a good point. And why there is a higher PCR? Because there are larger provisioning that has been done by the PSBs this time. Why? Because there were regulatory requirements by the RBI wherein they asked all the banks to increase their risk weights with regarding to loans given to the NBFCs. तो यहाँ पे किसकी बात हो रही है? जितने भी बैंक्स ने NBFCs को लोन दिए थे उनके रिगार्डिंग जो रिस्क वेट्स थे वो इंक्रीज कर दिए गए थे, and that is the reason that there has been an increased level of provision by each bank. And this data says that PSBs are the one that have higher PCR in this case. Okay, I hope the data is clear. The share of standard assets in the large borrowers. Okay, now we are talking about large borrowers and how much of the borrowers are standardized assets. Okay, standardized assets matlab that they are paying the loan EMIs on time and they are very disciplined with the payments of the loan. Okay, so what is the share of that standardized asset in the large borrower case? It has decreased to 34.6%, which is a negative sign for the bank. Okay, it should be in increased nature, right? Because it is a good point for the bank, and we can see that there has been a decrease to 34.6%. Right. The last point says write-offs to gross GNPA, which is 26.5% for all scheduled commercial banks. Okay, write-offs क्या होते हैं? That the banks have cleaned up their balance sheet. Okay, कुछ ऐसे लोन्स होते हैं which have turned into a bad loan, मतलब कि वहां से रिकवरी के chances are very minimal. Okay, so in that case what banks do, they remove all such bad loans and keep on revising the balance sheet. It is a process that they do as per accounting principles. सो राइट ऑफ होंगे, उतने ज्यादा लॉसेज हैं बैंक्स के लिए, तो ये राइट ऑफ कम होने चाहिए. तो इस केस में कितने हैं? 26.5% फॉर ऑल SCBs. ओके, आई होप इट इज क्लियर. ओके, so now I have put this chart here in order to tell you the sector wise asset quality. Okay, I know this is a very minute data. Okay, but we will discuss this in a way that you will able to understand which sector has greater risk in terms of GNPA. Okay, so let's talk about this. Now the first data here, this data says that under the normal scenario, the GNPA ratio of different sectors, that is agriculture, industry, services and personal loans. ठीक है, इन सबके GNPA डिस्कस करेंगे हम. Right, we can see that the agriculture loans have larger share and so as the personal loans have smaller share in comparison to all type of sectors. Right, we can see that the GNPA of agriculture sector is 6.2%. Okay, 6.2% in normal scenario, and under the industry sector it is 2.9% under normal scenario, 2.5% for the service sector under normal scenario, and 1.2% for the personal loans under the normal scenario. Right, now what if there is a stressed situation? Okay, under stressed situation, let's discuss the same data under the stressed situation. So we can see that agriculture sector's GNP has increased by 20 bps. Okay, why? Because under the stress condition, the agriculture GNPA is expected to rise by 20 bps. Okay, if you talk about the industry sector, it has increased to 4%, very large increase. It was earlier 2.9 and it has increased to 4%. Okay, if you talk about the service sector, right, it has increased to 2.5, it has increased from 2.5% to 3.0%. Okay, and if we talk about the personal loans, it has increased from 1.2% to 2%. Okay, so we can see the largest GNPA under the stress scenario is agriculture sector. So agriculture sector is the one which is the riskiest one. Okay, and if we talk about which industry or which sector has largest increase in GNPA, it would be industry. Industry sector is the one which is going to be very risky under the stressed scenario. Okay, I hope it is clear. Okay, so GNPA ratio for personal loans. Now we have talked about personal loans in our previous sessions as well. So that is the reason that I have put this section as well herein, because पर्सनल लोन्स की जो डिमांड है वो काफी इंक्रीज हो गई है और बैंक्स का जो जीएनपीए है वो ज्यादा पर्सनल लोन से ही आ रहा है. सो हेंस वी आर डिस्कसिंग दिस डेटा हियर कि पर्सनल लोन्स की भी किस कैटेगरी से अगर हमें देखना हो, कौन सा ऐसा सेक्टर है या फिर कौन सी ऐसी कैटेगरी है पर्सनल लोन्स की विच इज मोर रिस्कियर फॉर द बैंक. ओके, सो वी हैव पुट हियर if this data is related to the PSB, this data is related to the private sector banks, and this is related to the foreign banks, and this is related to the all scheduled commercial banks. So our focus would be on this data, that is all scheduled commercial banks. तो अगर हम देखें सबका डेटा, that housing loans have 1% of GNPA and credit cards have 2.2% of the GNPA, and vehicles and auto loans have 1.4% of the GNPA, and education loans have 2.7% of GNPA. अब अगर हम इन सबको देखें ध्यान से, then we can see that education loans have the highest ratio in terms of GNPA. So most riskiest loan category under the personal loans are educational loans. Okay, so we will remember this. Okay, so education loans have higher GNPA of 2.7%. And secondly, what is the most riskiest one is credit card. Okay, credit card are the most riskiest one loans category under personal loans. I hope it is clear. The data is clear to you. Okay, let's move to the next data which talks about the capital adequacy of scheduled commercial banks. अभी जो सारा डेटा है scheduled commercial banks का ही है. Okay, I hope it is clear to you. Now this whole data which has been written here is as of this September 2024. Okay, let's discuss this. So the capital to risk weighted asset ratio. Now capital to risk weight क्या होती है? CRAR. That is how much capital does bank have all the enough capital in order to cover its potential losses. Okay, so ये जो capital इन्हें maintain करनी होती है, that is capital to risk weight asset ratio. Okay, potential losses. Okay, potential losses को cover करने के लिए enough capital होनी चाहिए with the bank, and it should be as per the regulatory norms. It should be 9% as per the Basel norms. Okay, as per the Basel norms it should be 9%, but अगर डेटा देखा जाए तो it is 16.7%, well above the regulatory requirement. So we can say that it is a positive sign. They have maintained the CRAR well above the regulatory requirement, which is a good point here. Okay, let's talk about common equity tier 1 capital. Okay, so tier 1 capital is the most important, or we can say the core capital of the bank. Okay, the core capital of the bank, it includes what? It includes equity and reserves. Okay, so this is the core capital of the bank, and banks have to maintain such tier 1 capital ratio with them, which is 5.5% as per the Basel norms, right? And they have maintained 14%, well above the regulatory requirement. Okay, nothing is technical in it, कुछ समझने वाला नहीं है इसमें. It is all factual. Okay, now we will talk about the macro stress test. अब जो आगे बात होगी वो होगी macro stress test की. That means that what RBI do? RBI take an hypothetical situation wherein they pressurize the bank under a situation wherein they will judge them based on how they will react under uncertainty in a situation of a global uncertainty, like such kind of risk are put on such kind of उन्हें ऐसे एक रिस्की पोजीशन में डाला जाता है जहां पर उनकी जो ईच एंड एवरी मैट्रिक है वो ध्यान से देखा जाता है कि वो किस लेवल तक गिर सकता है या फिर किस लेवल तक बढ़ रहा है, राइट। सो इसमें 3 सिनेरियोस लिए जाते हैं। दैट इज द बेसलाइन सिनेरियो, दिस इज द स्टेबल, दैट इज द नॉर्मल कंडीशंस में देखा जाता है। अंडर द नॉर्मल कंडीशन हाउ विल बैंक रिएक्ट टू अ पर्टिकुलर रिस्क, राइट। अंडर द एडवर्स सिनेरियो जहां पर जियोपॉलिटिकल रिस्क यानी कि ग्लोबल लेवल पर रिस्क देखे जाते हैं, ओके, सप्लाई चेन डिस्ट्रप्शन, राइट, टाइटर मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी, इन सब रिस्क को कंसीडर करके बैंक की सिचुएशन देखी जाती है। सो दिस इज एडवर्स सिनेरियो 1, ओके। एडवर्स सिनेरियो 2 का होगा जहां पर ग्लोबल स्लो डाउन, द ग्लोबल लेवल में पूरा स्लो डाउन हो गया है, ट्रेड डिस्ट्रप्शन हो गई है, इनकम्प्लीट मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी ट्रांसमिशन, दैट मीन्स the transmissions of policies laid down by the monetary policy committee is not even transmitting. This is the scenario that we will deal here, okay. So this is adverse scenario 2. I hope it is clear. We have talked about what are the 3 conditions under which banks will be stress test, and now we will discuss their metrics under different situation, okay. So first thing is about the CRAR. These are projections, okay. This can be asked in your examination, direct question from the projections, okay. So projections कब तक की ली हुई है? March 2026 की, that means next 6 months, okay. So baseline, that is the normal scenario में जो है, the CRAR is expected to decline from 6.6% to 6.5%. So we can see that there is a marginal decrease or there is a moderation in the CRAR, okay. Under the adverse scenario, okay, the CRAR may fall to 14.3% from 16.6%, okay. So there is a chances of 4 banks to breach the minimum 9% of the requirement. So basically ये क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं, that under the adverse scenario 1, the CRAR will drop to 14.3%. Also ऐसे भी कुछ बैंक्स होंगे that 4 banks might breach this regulatory requirement, that they would not be able to maintain this regulatory requirement of CRAR of 9%, okay. I hope it is clear. Under the adverse scenario 2, the CRAR is expected to fall 15.7%, okay, and no bank breaches the minimum requirement, okay. So under this case, there is no bank that is breaching the CRAR norm as per the Basel norm, okay. Let's talk about the GNPA, that is gross non-performing assets projections. Under the normal scenario, it is expected to increase from 2.6% to 3%, okay. Under the adverse scenario 1, it is expected to rise to 5%, okay, and under the adverse scenario 2, it is expected to rise 5.3%, okay. Okay, I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the earnings and the profitability. It is a very important metric because profitability is the one at which the bank survives, है ना। जो profitability होती है, जो earnings होती है, that define कि उनका net interest margin कितना है, right? And they also help them boost the credit also in the economy, and hence it is a very important metric to be discussed here. So profit after tax, okay, वो कितना है? Increased by 22.2%, okay, from in the first half of the financial year 2024-2025. I hope it is clear, okay. It has been increased by 22.2%, okay. And if we talk about the banks, the public sector bank has the highest growth in profit after tax, and private banks have the second number of growth under profit after tax, that is 20.2% growth, and foreign banks have the least, or we can say the lowest profit after tax growth, okay, under the scheduled commercial bank. I hope it is clear. And what is the reason behind such increase in the growth of profit after tax is other operating income. Now other operating income जिसे हम कहते हैं OOI, वो क्या होता है? It is the income that banks earn. Okay, it is the income that banks earn from other sources like fees, financial market में profits, foreign exchange ट्रेड. ओके, तो उन्हें बेसिकली जो उनका कोर बिजनेस है ऑफ लैंडिंग, वहां से उनको प्रॉफिट नहीं हुआ है. देयर इज सम अदर सोर्सेज फ्रॉम विच दे हैव गेन्ड अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉफिट्स. ओके, सो दिस इज द वन, this factor, this is OOI, that is other operating income, are the factor that is contributing towards the growth of public sector banks that have reached their the profit after tax growth to 30.2%. Okay, I hope it is clear. The reason is clear and the data is clear to you. Okay. हाँ, तो ये 6 months नहीं है, right उल्लस बैलन. This is not 6 months, this is March 2026. तो ये ज्यादा का है, ठीक है. more than 6 months, more than 1 year का होगा ये डेटा. ओके, more than 1 year का है. ओके, let's move to the next data which talks about the liquidity. Now liquidity is a very important factor for the banking sector. Why? Because they have to maintain the liquidity with them in order to serve the society, in order to meet the demand of their borrowers and the users, right? So the first point talks about the liquidity coverage ratio, that is short-term liquidity. It is a ratio that checks short-term liquidity of next 30 days, right? So they have to maintain more than 100% of LCR with them as per the regulatory norm. So as per the financial stability report, the liquidity coverage ratio is 128.5%, which is well above the minimum regulatory requirement of 100%. Okay, it is for all banks. So all scheduled commercial banks have liquidity coverage ratio. Okay, have maintained their liquidity coverage ratio, and foreign banks showing the highest LCR. Okay, so we will remember this, that foreign banks have the highest liquidity coverage ratio under the scheduled commercial banks. Okay, and what are the reasons? That in the financial stability report there is one more point which says that there was 140% something of LCR with them, and it has been reduced to this 128.5%, right? So why there has been a decrease? Because they have increased their provisions, right? They have increased their provisions and hence their liquidity has been reduced. Okay, so we will remember this point, that in case the question appears, in case you are writing the same in the descriptive answer, you can highlight that there has been a reduction in the LCR under the all scheduled commercial banks. Why? Because they are maintaining more provision with them, and hence it is the reason why it has dropped. And which bank has the highest LCR with them? Which is foreign banks. Okay, let's talk about the second point which talks about net stable funding ratio. अब net stable funding ratio होता क्या है? Okay, we can discuss here, right? So this is a ratio that talks about the long-term liquidity. Long-term liquidity, that is more than 1 year. Okay, this is a capital on which banks can rely for next 1 year. Banks can rely for next 1 year. For next 1 year. Okay, तो लिक्विडिटी कवरेज रेशियो किसकी बात करते हैं? शॉर्ट टर्म लिक्विडिटी की. बट हम अगर NSFR की बात करें, इट टॉक्स अबाउट द लॉन्ग टर्म लिक्विडिटी. दैट मीन्स द कैपिटल दैट कैन सपोर्ट द बैंक्स, और बैंक्स कैन सिंपली रिलाई ऑन दैट कैपिटल फॉर नेक्स्ट 1 year. Okay, so it should be also more than 100% as per the regulatory norm. It should be 100%, And what banks have maintained? Banks have maintained 124.6% with them. Okay, so which is well above the regulatory requirement, and hence it is a positive sign. So declined marginally for the PSBs and PVBs between March to September due to higher growth in the required stable funding. Okay, this point talks about the same thing. Okay, so there has been a marginal reduction from March to September, and what was the reason? That they were keeping more provision in order to ensure stability of the Indian banking system. Okay. Now we are done with the scheduled commercial banks, and now we will talk about the urban cooperative banks. Okay. I hope scheduled commercial banks में कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी. Okay. Nothing was technical. It was all factual, and I have tried my best to explain you where there was a need to explain something. Okay. So we are going to talk about the urban cooperative banks. Okay. UCBs. तो सबसे पहले वैसे ही पैटर्न चलेगा, उनकी क्रेडिट ग्रोथ डिस्कस करेंगे, जीएनपीए डिस्कस करेंगे, पीसीआर डिस्कस करेंगे, एंड लिक्विडिटी रेशियो कवरेज डिस्कस करेंगे, एंड सो एंड सो फॉर्थ. ओके, सो फर्स्ट डेटा टॉक्स अबाउट द क्रेडिट ग्रोथ. ओके, तो क्रेडिट ग्रोथ कितनी रही है? 7.4%. ओके, ईयर ऑन ईयर ग्रोथ इन सितंबर 2024. अगर हम शेड्यूल कमर्शियल बैंक्स की देखें, दे हैव अ क्रेडिट ग्रोथ ऑफ 11.3%, राइट? 11.3%. दिस इज अ डबल डिजिट ग्रोथ. This is a double digit growth, but in case of UCBs, they have a single digit growth. Okay. And what is the capital position, which is CRAR? How much CRAR they have maintained? It is 17.5% as of September 2024, driven by tier 1 institutions. Okay. Now we have discussed that कि CRAR जो है इनका, it is 17.5%, which is above the regulatory requirement. Or who has driven the most towards this position, which is tier 1 institution, and hence we are discussing it here. What is tier 1, tier 2 institution? So UCBs की जो classification है, it is based on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4. And how they have categorized? They are categorized based on the deposits they have. Okay, the more deposits they have, the more will be the level of tier category. Okay, suppose in tier 1 category there are UCBs that have 100 rupees of crore, okay, or less. Under tier 2 category there are 100 to 1000 rupees of 1000 crore of deposits with them. And who falls under the tier 3 category of UCB, which is 1000 to 10,000 crore of UCBs of deposits. Okay, and under tier 4 UCBs having deposits more than 10,000 crore. Okay, so there are 4 level of, or we can say 4 categories of UCBs. So who have contributed towards this CRAR is tier 1. So the banks that are falling under the tier 1 categories have maintained more CRAR with them. Okay, I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the asset quality of the UCBs. Okay, again asset quality जब भी discuss होती है, we talk about the GNPA, NNPA, large borrowers की बात होती है, right? Provision कितना create किया उसकी बात होती है, and hence we are discussing it here. GNPA कितना है? 9.6% for all UCBs. Okay, as of September 2024. NNPA की बात करेंगे, that is after removing all the provision. ऐसा कौन सा bad loan है जो provision से backed नहीं है? NNPA, it is 3.3% for all UCBs. So you can see here that the GNPA is very high under the UCBs, right? So we can say that the problem of bad loans is more ascertained, or we can say concentrated in the UCB's banking structure, right? Let's talk about the GNPA for large borrowers. Okay, अगर large borrowers का ही loans उठाए जाएं, उसमें कितने GNPA हैं? So there are 10.5% for all UCBs as of September 2024, which is again very high. The asset quality of the UCBs are not good enough in order to protect, in order to ensure the financial stability of the economy, right? And the fourth point says the provision coverage ratio. Okay, how much provision is there? The provision has dropped to 67.5%. हमने पहले भी डिस्कस किया था. It should be between 70 to 80% as per the regulatory norms. Or we can say average number of PCR that banks have to maintain with them. It is 70 to 80%. But under the case of UCBs, it is 67.5%, which is low. Okay, I hope it is clear. And this portion here discusses about the CRAR that UCBs have to maintain at future requirement and as per current requirement. So अगर हम tier 1 UCBs की बात करें, they have to maintain a CRAR of 9%. ठीक है, फ्यूचर में जाके ये जो CRAR की रिक्वायरमेंट है that is increasing. Okay, so as per the current regulatory minimum CRAR, अभी करंट में यानी कि 2025 में 2025 में they have to maintain a 10% of the CRAR with them. Okay, by the end of March 2025 they have to maintain 11% of the CRAR with them, and by the end of March 31st 2026 they have to maintain 12% of the CRAR with them. So the regulatory requirement of maintaining the CRAR is increasing by each and every successive year. Okay, so I hope it is clear. It is a very important static information. You must know this fact. Okay, a direct question from this is expected. Okay, you must know this information. Okay, let's talk about again UCBs. अब हम उनकी profitability की बात करेंगे, right? And first says NIM, that is net interest margin. मैंने कल भी डिस्कस किया था, in our previous session भी डिस्कस किया था that net interest margin is the difference between what banks pay and what banks get in terms of interest rate. ठीक है, पे किसे करते हैं? डिपॉजिटर्स को. और किससे लेते हैं इंटरेस्ट? बोरोवर्स से. So whatever gap is there in between the both interest rate is NIM. ये जितना ज्यादा होगा उतना ज्यादा प्रॉफिटेबल होगा बैंक्स के लिए. So under UCBs the NIM is 3.4%. It is 3.4%. And if we talk about the return on assets, जितने भी बैंक्स के पास एसेट्स होते हैं उनके ऊपर रिटर्न कितना है? Okay, how we can calculate it? Profit, or we can say return divided by the total assets of the bank. Its ratio is 0.8% for the UCBs. Okay, 0.8% for the UCBs, all kind of UCBs. Now there are return on equity. Return on equity कितना है? It is 8.4%, which is a good sign. ठीक है, it is a good sign. Why? Because the return on equity is more than the return on assets. Okay, now we have come to the stress testing part of UCBs. Okay, we will discuss one by one. So there are different scenarios of risk. Okay, let's say there is one scenario, credit default risk. Second scenario, credit concentration risk. The third scenario talks about the market risk for the trading books, and market risk for the banking books. Okay, let's discuss one by one. So credit default risk क्या होता है? When there is higher number of borrowers who are defaulting. Okay, default rate जो है borrowers का वो बढ़ जाता है when there is an increased rate of defaulting by the borrowers. Okay, under this scenario, how will each category of UCBs, that is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 will fail in the regulatory requirement. So we can say under the credit default risk, there is no bank who is failing under the tier 1 category. If we talk about the tier 2, we can see that under the baseline, that is under the normal scenario, 10 UCBs are expected to fail. Okay, under the medium risk scenario, 16 banks of tier 2 category is expected to fail. And if we talk about the severe risk scenario, 25 banks are expected to fail under the tier 2 categories of UCBs. Okay, let's talk about the tier 3. Under the normal scenario, it is 3 banks. Under the medium scenario, 6 banks are expected to fail, and under the severe risk scenario, 9 banks are expected to fail. And no banks are expected to fail in case of tier 4 category under the any risk scenario. Okay, so this ensures that under the case of borrower defaulting, there is no risk under the tier 4 category. Okay, let's talk about the credit concentration risk. This is the risk of default by a single institution or sector. This means, what if a single sector or a single institution defaults on its loan? Okay, in that scenario, how much banks are expected to fail? Okay, under tier 1 capital, there is no bank who is expected to fail, but under the tier 2 capital, normal scenario mein 9 banks are expected to fail. Under the medium scenario, 15 banks are expected to fail, and under the severe scenario, the 21 banks are expected to fail. Okay, under the tier 3 categories of UCBs, 3 banks, 6 banks and 11 banks in normal, medium and severe scenario is expected to fail respectively. Okay, and under the severe scenario, in case of credit concentration risk, tier 4, one bank of tier 4 category is expected to fail. Okay, I hope it is clear. I know this is quite difficult to understand and quite difficult to remember also, but this is going to be very important for you. You can write this information in any of your descriptive answer, or you can tackle a question related to such data. Okay, I hope it is clear. The market risk, interest rate risk in trading book. Okay, market risk in terms of interest rate. That means, what if interest rate falls or increases significantly? Now, what kind of risk can arise from this fluctuation in the interest rate in terms of trading books? Now, what are trading books? Trading books that the assets that banks are holding with them. If there is an interest rate reduction or increase, how these trading assets or how these financial securities in the balance sheet of the banks are expected to behave or expected to react based on such change in the interest rate. Okay, so let's talk about the tier 1 category of the UCBs. No risk is there to the tier 1 UCBs. Okay, let's talk about the tier 2 category of the UCBs. Okay, in case there is an interest rate reduction or increase. अच्छा, इसका एक एग्जांपल ले लेते हैं so that you can understand this risk in a better way. Okay, तो एक एग्जांपल ले लेते हैं. Suppose the prices of the bonds have increased substantially. Okay, the prices of the bonds have increased substantially. Okay, जैसे ही bonds के prices increase होते हैं, there is an inverse relationship between a bond and the yield, right? Banks ने इन bonds को hold किया हुआ था, right? अब उनकी जो yield है वो reduce हो गई है. That is their interest rate. That is the return on the bond. The effective return on the bond has reduced, and this is how their trading or their financial security, the value of their financial security increases or decreases. Okay, I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the UCBs category under tier 2. 7 banks under the normal scenario is expected to fail. 7 banks under the medium scenario are expected to fail, and 9 banks are expected to fail under the severe scenario. And same thing is with the tier 3 capital. 3 banks in all scenarios, that is normal, medium and severe risk, are expected to fail under the tier 3 capital, tier 3 category. Okay, and no banks are expected to fail under the tier 4 category of the banks. Okay, in any of the scenario. Let's talk about the market risk इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क इन बैंकिंग बुक्स. ओके, अब इसका भी एक एग्जांपल ले लेते हैं. नाउ इफ देयर इज अ ह्यूज फ्लक्चुएशन इन इंटरेस्ट रेट, सपोज आरबीआई ने रिड्यूस कर दिए बहुत ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट रेट्स, ठीक है. द रेपो रेट हैज बीन रिड्यूस्ड टू से 4% or 3%. Hypothetical example. Okay, so the banks have to provide loans at a low rate, right? And they also have to give low rates in terms of deposits to the depositors, right? So the interest rate that will be offered by banks to the depositors will also reduce, and at which they are giving loan, the interest rate at which they are giving loan will also reduce, and this will also, squeeze, or we can say reduce the net interest margin of the banks, which is a very risky thing for the bank. And this is how the market risk due to fluctuation in the interest rate hampers the books of the banks. Okay, so in such scenario we can see that there is no bank which is failing under the tier 1 category, and there are few banks that are failing under the tier 2 category, right? And there are no bank, there are again few banks, 1 and 2 banks, who are failing in the medium and severe scenario under the tier 3 UCBs categories. Okay, and there is no bank which is falling under the tier 4 category under normal, medium and severe scenario. So from all these 4 charts, okay, you can observe that tier 1 categories of bank are not failing in any of the scenario, and they are financially stable in all kind of stress testing. Okay, so this is a take, we can say this is the information that we are taking from here, that tier 1 categories of UCBs are financially stable in all kind of stress testing. Okay, I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the primary UCBs and their stress testing in the liquidity risk. Okay, liquidity risk क्या होता है? In case the banks are not able to maintain their liquidity with them. Okay, what if there is an increased demand by the citizens regarding the money? Suppose every other citizen or every other depositors wants their money back from the bank. So do banks have that much money with them or not? Okay, so under the tier 1 category there is no bank which is failing. Under the tier 2 category there are few banks, okay, that might fail in such scenario. In the tier 3 category of UCBs, again there are few banks that are failing in different scenarios, and there are few banks that are failing in tier 4 category of the UCBs. Okay, I hope it is clear. Okay, now we have came to the NBFC sector, wherein we will discuss each and every metric related to the NBFCs. Okay, so there are 4 layers of NBFCs, right? Base layer, middle layer, upper layer and top layer. We all know such facts. Okay, now the share of each layer of NBFC is discussed here. So base layer, NBFCs under the base layer have 6% of the share in the whole market. Okay, and the middle layer, how much middle layer NBFCs are there in the whole NBFC sector? It is 71.2%. And how much upper layer NBFCs are there in the NBFC sector? It is 22.8%. Okay, so we can see more than 94% of the holding under the NBFC sector is holded by the middle layer NBFC and the upper layer NBFC, and the data that we are going to discuss in the next slides, it are related to middle layer and upper layer NBFCs only. Here you can see in the picture as well, they have discussed NBFC UL and NBFC ML data. Okay, so no data is related to the base layer here. Okay, let's discuss about the credit growth. Okay, so the overall NBFC's credit growth has slowed to 16% in September, which was 22% in the previous September 2023. So this is the year-on-year data. Okay, and what is the reason behind such fact is high risk weights for the consumer lending. As we know that RBI released a regulatory requirement for the NBFCs wherein they have to maintain more and more risk weights with them related to personal loans that are given by NBFCs to the lender, to the borrowers. Okay. So here we are discussing the GNPA ratio of the NBFCs. Okay. It is 3.4%. 3.4% of both. ठीक है, दोनों का मिला के एवरेज करके it is 3.4% as NBFC का sector. Okay, under NBFC sector it is 3.4%. Okay. Now we will discuss about the capital adequacy and the profitability of the NBFC sector. Okay, this part talks about the CRAR. This part talks about the NIM. Okay, net interest margin. This talks about the return on assets, and this talks about the return on equity. Let's discuss each and every chart here. We will focus on the NBFC sector chart. Okay, so the CRAR maintained by NBFC is 26.1% as of September 2024. Okay, if we talk about the net interest margin, the net interest margin is 5.1% for NBFC sector. Okay, and for the return on assets, it is 2.9% for the NBFC sector. Okay, and for the return on equity, it is 12.6% of the NBFC sector. Okay, I hope it is clear. All the data is given in here in the chart. Okay. Okay, now we have come to provision coverage ratio. Okay, so here we are discussing that the PCR of NBFCs are 68.7%. Okay, which has to be between 70 to 80%, but which it is not. So it is a low PCR that has been maintained by the NBFCs. Okay, I hope it is clear. There is no technicality. There is nothing. There is nothing to explain. Okay, so the NBFC stress testing chart is here, which talk about the credit risk in case the borrowers default on their loan. Okay, so under the baseline, so this chart is, we will look at the chart first. So the pink bar talks about the GNPA, and the purple bar talks about the CRAR, and the orange bar talks about the number of NBFCs that are going to fail. Okay, so under the credit risk scenario, the baseline, under the baseline, that is under the normal scenario, GNPA ratio of the NBFC is 3.4%, and under the medium risk scenario, the GNPA of NBFC is 4.7%, and under the high risk scenario, the GNPA is 6%. Okay, let's write it here. Okay, GNPA, ठीक है, baseline that is the normal scenario के अंदर GNPA कितना रहेगा, 3.4% रहेगा. Medium scenario में it is 4.7%, and under the high risk scenario it is 6%. Let's talk about CRAR, right? CRAR की projections देखते हैं. Under the baseline, under the medium, and under the high risk scenario. Under the baseline, it is 21.2%. Okay, so they would be able to maintain 21.2% of the CRAR with them. NBFCs की बात कर रहे हैं. Okay, under the medium risk scenario, it is 20.5. So there would be a slight, or we can say marginal, decrease in the CRAR under the medium scenario, and under the high risk it is 20.2%. Okay, so it is expected to again fall marginally to 20.2% under the high risk scenario. Let's talk about the number of NBFCs that are expected to fail. Okay, under the baseline scenario, that is under the normal scenario, it is expected to fail by 100. Okay, so 100 NBFCs are expected to fail. 14 NBFCs are expected to fail under the medium risk scenario, and 15 banks, or we can say 15 NBFCs are expected to fail under the high risk scenario. Okay, you can create this chart. Okay, you can create chart like such in your notes. Okay, so note making is very important whenever we talk about the data, because we have to learn a lot of data, right? So what we will do, that we will create charts like such. We will create different sections for SCBs, UCBs and NBFCs, and here you will write all the metrics. Okay, so you will put all the figures in that. Okay, so through this chart you will keep on remembering such data, keep on looking at that chart so that you can remember the figures in your mind. Okay, so whenever a new FSR or new financial stability report will come, you will able to compare the data by creating same kind of chart. Okay, so this is how you have to remember all the data. Okay, note making is very important. The more you write, the more you will able to remember things more nicely. Okay. Okay, Shubhra, I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the interconnectedness. Okay, this chapter also talks about the interconnectedness. Why we are discussing about the interconnectedness? Okay, because the banks, NBFCs, mutual fund companies, okay, or UCBs are all taking loans from each other. Either they are giving loan to each other or they are taking loan from each other, right? So there is an interconnectedness. There is an interconnectedness between these institutions. Now, what if this bank, this NBFC is not able to pay back the loan to the banks? Now, this could be a default, a large number of default for the bank, and this could be a interconnectedness. This can become a interconnectedness risk, systemic risk to this bank, and hence there is a need to look at the interconnectedness. How much banks and institutions are interconnected with each other, and how we will look at this? We will look at this how much banks have borrowed from each other and how much gross receivables are there with one institutions. Okay, in order to avoid there is no concentration of the papers, or there is not too much concentration of the receivables with one bank. Okay, so with this we can understand there is a need of diversification of funds. Okay, we can see that there is a need of diversification of funds. Okay, so banks raises funds from different resources, and it should not concentrate its borrowing or raising of funds from one or two institutions. It can take or raise funds from different sources in order to maintain the diversification. Even if one bank or one institution fails to pay or give the money, they are able to raise funds from the alternative sources of finance. Okay, I hope it is clear. I hope the agenda of discussing this topic here is clear. Okay, so let's discuss here what is written here in the PPT, that interbank market. What is interbank market? Interbank market is where banks lend to and borrow from each other. We have already discussed here that it represents a 3.3% of the total assets of the banking system. ठीक है, तो जितना भी बैंक ने आपस में बोरो या फिर बोरो किया हुआ है वो कितना है? 3.3% of the total assets of the banking sector. Okay, this is a very important data. You have to remember this 3.3%. Okay, so I have put few data here. There are more data related to scheduled commercial banks as well. There is more data related to insurance company, right? You will find that in the PDF that we are going to release regarding the financial stability report. You will find more data. Once you will able to understand this data, you will able to understand that data as well. Okay, so it would be a ऐसे ही हम फिर डेटा पढ़ते रहेंगे, फैक्चुअल न्यूज़ है, उसमें कुछ समझने वाला है नहीं, तो यू कैन सिंपली रिमेंबर or take or collect that data from that PDF itself. So I have put two data here. Okay, I will make you understand how you have to read this data, and you will be able to understand the same from the PDFs. Okay, so the first data says that AMCs, that is asset management companies, mutual fund companies की बात हो रही है यहाँ पर. हाउ मच ग्रॉस रिसीवेबल्स, यानी कि उनको कितना पैसा लेना है फ्रॉम, कहां से, शेड्यूल कमर्शियल बैंक से, एनबीएफसी से, एआईएफएस से एंड हाउसिंग फाइनेंस कंपनी से। ओके, तो इन सभी बैंक्स ने म्यूचुअल फंड से पैसा उठाया, यानी कि दे हैव रेज्ड मनी फ्रॉम these mutual fund companies. Okay, and how much gross receivables these mutual fund companies have? 19.16 lakh crore, which is 29% of their AUM. Okay, asset they are managing currently. Okay, so we can see that a substantial amount of loan has been given by a mutual fund to the scheduled commercial banks. Okay, so there has been an increased investment in CDs and reduced CPN investment. So banks क्या करते हैं, क्या इशू करते हैं, कमर्शियल पेपर इशू करते हैं, सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट इशू करते हैं, एंड थ्रू दीज फंड्स म्यूचुअल फंड कंपनीज हैव प्रोवाइडेड funds to these scheduled commercial banks or NBFCs. Okay, and this is how they have become a gross receivable. They have a gross receivable of 19.16 lakh crore. Okay, I hope it is clear. Let's talk about the insurance company. Insurance company, the gross receivables are 10.44 lakh crore. And who are the primary recipient in this case? SCBs, that is scheduled commercial banks, NBFCs and housing finance companies were the primary recipient under this. Okay, long-term debt equity and accounted for over 90% of the receivables. So under this 2.44 lakh crore, more than 90% of this is related to debt. That means bonds में investment, bonds में, debentures में, okay, corporate bond तो नहीं आएगा, खैर बैंक से रिलेटेड है तो डिबेंचर्स एंड बॉन्ड्स ही आएंगे. ओके, आई होप इट इज क्लियर. Okay, let's talk about the contingent analysis. The contingent analysis estimates the potential systemic risk in the financial network by evaluating the impact of single institution failure on the broader system. So contingent analysis क्या होता है? Whenever there is a one institution that fails in the market, and due to that failure, the effect of that failure has been impacted or spread around the other institutions as well, other banks as well. So जो एक institution का failure है उसका impact बहुत ही बड़ा हो जाता है, उसको हम कहते हैं contingent analysis. Okay, and under such scenario we can see that the solvency losses is 3.1%. Okay, solvency losses क्या होते हैं? That how much capital or how much money that bank have with them in order to cover all the potential losses. Okay, all the potential losses. Okay, this solvency must be stronger solvency must be stronger with the bank. So in case there is a contingent risk in the market, the banks will lose 3.1% of their tier 1 capital. Okay, ये हम किसकी बात करें? Scheduled commercial banks. In case of scheduled commercial banks, under the contingent risk, the banks are expected to lose their solvency of 3.1% of the tier 1 capital, which was 5.06% in the March 2024. So March 2024 में जो data आया था, it was 5.06 in that case. But now the solvency loss has reduced. It has come to 3.1%, and hence it is a positive point that banks are more capable of taking care of the risk. They are more capable of covering the potential losses in case of uncertainty in the market. Okay. Let's talk about the NBFCs and HFCs. इसी रिस्क सिनेरियो में अब हम NBFCs और हाउसिंग फाइनेंस कंपनीज को देखेंगे. Okay. NBFCs and HFCs are among the large borrowers in the system. Okay, they have borrowed a lot from the market because उनका जो major funding होती है वो कहाँ से आती है? बैंक से आती है, right? So the failure of large NBFC could wipe out 2.74%. Okay, so there are जो large size of NBFCs और HFCs हैं, they are expected to fail in such scenario. और उससे क्या होगा, दैट इट विल वाइप आउट 2.74% ऑफ द टीयर 1 कैपिटल, ठीक है, टीयर 1 कैपिटल ऑफ बैंक्स, ओके, while the failure of the largest HFCs could result in 4.1% of the losses. So the losses in case of HFCs, that is housing finance companies, are greater as compared to NBFCs. Okay, so we will remember this data. This is a very important fact. Okay, certificate of deposits and commercial papers are the short term लिक्विडिटी सिक्योरिटीज होती हैं, जिससे जो बैंक्स होते हैं शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए लोन्स लेते हैं, ठीक है, फ्रॉम द मार्केट, ठीक है, एनीवन कैन पार्टिसिपेट इन दैट, ओके, शॉर्ट टर्म लिक्विडिटी मैनेजमेंट के लिए दे इशू सच कमर्शियल पेपर्स एंड सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट, ओके. Let's we have come to the chapter 3rd. Okay, so we are done with chapter 2. Now we have come to chapter 3, which talks about the regulatory initiatives in the financial sector. Now we will first discuss about the risk and how the regulatory bodies like RBI and SEBI has recently released some initiatives in such scenario. We will discuss these one by one. So regulators are committed to address the risk, okay, and the key area of them were the risk from the technological advancement like AI, right, and cyber security threats. Again, this is a risk that has been related to the technological advancement, right, and third party dependency. If we are relying more on the third party service provider, in case of banks, it could lead to breach of data, right, and hence they are addressing such risk. Climate risk, in case of drought or flood, what kind of impact can be on the citizens and on the banking sector, okay. These are the risks that regulators are keep on looking at, okay. Their focus is more on these 4 risks, okay. So in order to mitigate risk related to the artificial intelligence in the financial sector, the RBI released the free AI in the financial sector. It was released by RBI. It is a framework which is applicable to all the banks and institutions under the financial sector. They have to maintain that they use these artificial intelligence responsibly and ethically, as the name tells you in the PPT here. Okay. The third point says stricter oversight on the NBFC. As we know that RBI released the guideline to increase the risk weights, right? And the agenda was to ensure financial stability, right? What RBI did? RBI ने proactively पहले ही रिस्क को ascertain कर लिया, पहले ही रिस्क को identify करके they released such guidelines wherein they have increased the risk weights. That means they are preparing the financial institutions well above the uncertainties, okay. So they are preparing the banking institutions for the upcoming uncertainties, okay. So these were the guidelines that has been issued by the RBI. This is a part of regulatory initiative that RBI has taken, okay. The fourth point says prompt corrective action framework. Under this, a framework was released by the RBI. Okay, in which a UCB which falls to maintain the PCR, LCR or CRAR will fall under such category of PCA, okay, and banks have to maintain such metrics in order to get out of this PCA basket, okay. तो ये भी एक रेगुलेटरी इनिशिएटिव था जो आरबीआई ने लिया था in order to maintain the financial stability of the UCBs, right? This is going to be effective from April 1st, 2025, okay. willful defaulters. RBI ने एक और गाइडलाइंस निकाली थी for the willful defaulters, wherein they have identified that there are people who are willfully defaulting on the loan, and hence RBI released the guidelines wherein they have transparently showed a mechanism to identify such willful defaulters, and they have also outlined that what if this deliberate defaults happen, what can banks do. So this also gave powers to the bank. Okay, and this guidelines also mandate reporting of credit information on large defaulters. So just large people with large default are expected, their information will be given to credit information company. Okay, all such information will be shared by a bank to the CIC. Okay, I hope it is clear. These were the guidelines that we are discussing under the regulatory initiative that have been taken by the RBI. Okay, हमने ये SCBs के बारे में भी अपने प्रीवियस सेशन में डिस्कस किया था, wherein नॉन रेजिडेंट FPIs यानी कि फॉरेन पोर्टफोलियो इन्वेस्टर्स को तो अलाउड था ही SGBs में इन्वेस्ट करने के लिए, बट नाउ विद द अपकमिंग रेगुलेटरी गाइडलाइन द non-residents can also participate in SGB through IFSC. Okay, through IFSC, right? We discussed this under the master direction of non-resident investment in debt securities. राइट, हमने ये डिस्कस किया था अपनी प्रीवियस क्लासेस में, इसको हमने बहुत डिटेल में पढ़ा था ये वाले इनिशिएटिव को. So I hope it is clear. ठीक है, सेबी के इनिशिएटिव्स क्या रहे हैं? In order to provide protection to the consumers, wherein large number of influencers were giving wrong advices to the investors. So in order to protect them, in order to protect the customers and the users and the investors here, the SEBI released a guideline wherein they have stopped the investors from taking advices or relating or associating with the unregistered person wherein they are providing financial advices to them. So basically influencers क्या होते हैं? The unregistered persons होते हैं. They are not authorized to give any financial advice to the investors, and hence SEBI released such guidelines for the protection of investors, okay, for the betterment of the investors, that influencers are not authorized person. You should not take advice from influencers. So basically these are the examples, these are the regulatory initiatives that has been taken for the IFSC centers, by the RBI and by the SEBI, right? So we are done with this chapter as well, and we have come to the chapter 4 wherein we will discuss the systemic risk survey. तो बेसिकली हम इसमें मेन जो हमारे रिस्क रहेंगे उसके बारे में हम डिस्कस करेंगे, एंड वी विल सी दैट हाउ मच रिस्क हैज बीन इंक्रीज और डिक्रीज सो फार. ओके, so basically this systemic risk survey is conducted by RBI, okay, and this is the 27th round of the SRS, okay, and this was conducted in November 2024, and the survey talks about focus on the impact of global economic uncertainty on the India. Okay, so as per this SRS, that is systemic risk survey, the macroeconomic risk saw a marginal increase. What are macroeconomic risks? That are related to inflation, or domestic production of the economy. All such things are the factor that we include in macroeconomic risk. Suppose there is high inflation in the economy. Suppose the GDP ratio or the GDP of the economy has dropped. Okay, so these all are the factors that we include in macroeconomic risk. And as per this survey, the survey says or conclude that the macroeconomic risks are the one which are more riskier for the India's economy. Okay, we have discussed this thing that growth, inflation, capital inflows are the factors that we include in the macroeconomic risk. Okay, now this chart, or we can say picture here, talks about 4 main risk, that is the global risk. The second one is the macroeconomic risk, the financial market risk, wherein banks' profitability, their liquidity, their financial stability comes under fact, and institutional risk. That means what if there is one institution that fails? What if that failure of that one institution, how they impact the other institutions of different sectors? Okay, so these all are the risks that we are going to discuss. Okay, so as per November 2024, okay, the global risk has been unchanged. Okay, there is no change under the global risk. If we talk about the macroeconomic risk, there has been an increase of 20 BPS, right? There has been an increase of 0.2%, right, in the macroeconomic risk, and this has been increased. We have already discussed in the SRS that there is a marginal increase of risk in the macroeconomic risk, right? If we talk about the financial market risk, it talks about the financial market risk. So we are talking about the securities, okay, the regulations that are being taken by the SEBI, okay. So there has been a slight reduction in the risk, such financial market risk. There has been a slight reduction from 5.8% to 5.7%. So this has been decreased. So there is no risk from this, right? Institutional risk. So institutional risk, there is no change in the institutional risk, and it is unchanged. If we talk about how much the weightage of this risk, it is under the medium scenario. Okay, it is not too much. It is not too low risk. It is not very much high risk. It is under the medium scenario. These risks are under the medium stage. Okay. Okay, so I have briefly discussed here what type of risks are there. We discussed here whatever risk we have discussed here briefly. I have explained here that global risk include geopolitical conflict and geo-economical fragmentation, right? So all such risk comes under the global risk perception. Now, what kind of risk that we can currently face from the global risk perception is commodity risk. इसका क्या मतलब है? What if there is an increase in the price of, say, example ले लेते हैं, that what if there is an increase price of oil, too much increase in the price of oil. Okay, this kind of risk may arise out of global risk perception. Okay, and such risk they are talking about, that such risk, the commodity price risk and the monetary tightening in advanced economies saw a significant decrease in risk perception. बेसिकली वो कह रहे हैं ग्लोबल रिस्क परसेप्शन में कमोडिटी प्राइस रिस्क और मॉनेटरी टाइटनिंग बाय द एडवांस ऑफ इकोनॉमी, ये दोनों ही रिस्क बहुत कम हो गए हैं, मार्जिनली रिड्यूस हो गए हैं. तो इनसे हमें अब बिल्कुल भी कोई खतरा नहीं है, या फिर वी कैन से दैट दे आर लेस रिस्की. ओके, नाउ लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक रिस्क. वी ऑलरेडी डिस्कस domestic growth, inflation, capital flows are the factors that we include in the macroeconomic risk. And what is the major risk under the macroeconomic is the climate risk. Suppose abhi climate risk is the high risk category under the macroeconomic risk for the India. So मान लीजिए फ्लड आ जाती है या फिर ड्रॉट हो जाता है, right? So such kind of scenario can impact the production of the economy, and hence with the production of the economy the investment will be less and the employment will also be less. So this is a major risk that we are currently facing. Financial market risk में equity price volatility is going to be a high risk category. Why? Because क्योंकि टेक्नोलॉजी इतनी ज़्यादा फास्ट हो गई है, we can access the all the information in a speedy way, and hence due to such availability of information जो वोलेटिलिटी है मार्केट में वो जल्दी इंक्रीज और डिक्रीज होती है. सपोज देयर इज अ कंपनी ए, उनसे रिगार्डिंग कोई बैड न्यूज आ गई है एंड एवरीबडी इज अवेयर ऑफ दैट न्यूज, एंड सडनली विद इन 2 to 3 hours we can see the change of their prices in the security market, right? So this is how equity price volatility is one of the high risk category under the financial market risk. Okay, institutional risk. Okay, asset quality and the profitability related to one institution. Okay, and what is the problem in that one institution में भी, institutional risk में भी सबसे ज्यादा important risk यहाँ पर क्या है? साइबर रिस्क। ओके, वी नो दैट टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंक्रीज बहुत ज्यादा हो गया यूज करना, राइट, एंड हेंस साइबर रिस्क, द ब्रीच ऑफ डेटा, पर्सनल इंफॉर्मेशन का चोरी हो जाना, ऑल सच risk are the high risk category under the institutional risk. I hope it is clear. Okay, now key risk that domestic financial stability, तो यहाँ पर मैंने आपको कंसाइज फॉर्म में बता दिया है, इन समराइज फॉर्म, that what all other risk as per this SRS, that is systemic risk survey. So geopolitical risk है, global growth and inflation concerns है, capital outflow and impact on Indian rupee. We can see अभी currently हो ही रहा है that Indian rupee is depreciating, right? Increase in trade tariffs and its impact on global trade. US ने जो trade tariff propose करे हैं, right? They are a risky thing for the emerging economies and developing economies, right? The slowdown in the domestic growth and consumption demand. Okay, so even if suppose there is a high inflation in the market or due to geopolitical tension around the corner, the confidence of the citizens reduces. So this can lead to low domestic consumption and low domestic growth as well. Okay, so climate risk, we have already discussed that how a climate change, a significant climate change can impact the economy as a whole, and cyber security concerns are there due to AI adaptability, right? Now let's discuss the questions. Okay, let's start with the question. Question number 1. Recently, the RBI released the FSR. The FSR report reflects the collective assessment of subcommittee of the Financial Stability and Development Council on risk to financial stability and resilience of Indian financial system. According to the December FSR, what was the gross NPA of the scheduled commercial banks? Now, what is the gross NPA of the scheduled commercial banks? Okay, options are 5.3%, 3%, 2.6%, 9%, and 12%. What is the right answer? Tell me what is the right answer. Right, Abhishek? Option C is the correct answer. 2.6% is the correct answer. Let's come to the second question. Recently, RBI released the FSR. This reflects the collective assessment of risk to the financial stability and the resilience of the Indian financial system. What concerns have been raised about the private banks in the December 2024 financial stability report? So, options are excessive regulatory penalties, high exposure to agriculture loan, decline in profitability, over reliance on public sector borrowings, deteriorating asset quality hidden by rising write-offs. We talked about write-offs in PSBs, right? And what do you think is the right answer in this case? So basically, option E is the right answer. Why? Because there was rise of write-offs by the PSBs. We already discussed in the scheduled commercial banks data that write-offs have been increased by the scheduled commercial banks, and who are the main driver of this? And that is public sector banks. Okay. The systemic survey in the financial stability report categorized which of the following risk as medium risk for the Indian financial system. तो medium risk में कौन-कौन से ऐसे risk हैं अभी currently? First is geopolitical conflict and global inflation, cyber security threat and climate risk, foreign exchange volatility and trade tariffs. All of the above, only one. Tell me question 3. Which option is correct? Right, Abhishek. Right, Pragya. Option D is the correct answer. According to Financial Stability Report December 2024, what was the year-on-year credit growth for the SCBs as of December 2024? अब यहाँ पर दिसंबर का डेटा पूछा है for scheduled commercial banks किसका? Credit growth का. So what is the correct answer? 10.5%, 12.1%, 11.3%, 9.8%, 13.4%. So what do you think is the right answer? Right, Abhishek. Right, me. C is the right answer. C is the right answer. Okay, question number 5. What is the capital to risk weighted asset ratio (CRAR) of scheduled commercial banks as mentioned in the financial stability report of December 2024. तो आपसे CRAR पूछा गया है यहाँ पर SCBs का, right? So what is the right answer? Options है 14%, 16.7%, 9%, 15.5%, 12.3%. What is the right answer? So basically B is the right answer. 16.7% is the right answer here. Okay. Okay. Question number 6. According to financial stability report, what was the provision coverage ratio of primary urban cooperative banks UCBs के यहाँ पर डाटा पूछा है as of September 2024. Okay. PCR ratio पूछी है and let's see what is the options here. 70.3%, 65.8%, 67.5%, 68.9%, 66.2%. What is the correct answer? So basically C is the correct answer. Okay. So I hope the session was clear to you. I hope it was fruitful for you. ठीक है, नोट मेकिंग बहुत जरूरी है in case of data because data बहुत complicated होते हैं in remembering, right? So prepare charts for yourself, create note making for the data specifically. Okay, so that will help you in understanding and relating or comparing the data of two different days, right? Right. I hope you don't have any data because कोई technicality थी नहीं, all the things were factual, right? Okay. I think you don't have any doubt related to the session. So let's end this session now. Okay. I hope the session was good. I hope the session was fruitful for you. Okay. Do check the current affairs daily, right? We will cover from the next class. We will cover the current affairs, right? As usual. And with this session, we are done with the FSR report. We have completed the FSR report in a very brief manner. I have tried to make it as compact as I can. All right. So here we are done with the session. I hope you have enjoyed it. Okay. Best of luck for your exams. Okay.